Hi everyone, this is Tanya from Flying Dog Studio. Thank you so much for joining me as we take a look at the Pilot Falcon. Now, if you haven't caught I'm going to call it an unboxing, but basically a box opening of this pen and the inking of it, I will put that down below so that you can take a look at that. But in this video, I'm going to see how the pen actually performs while inking a piece. But before we start with that, I wanted to show you a little problem I ran into before I started inking. I got my pen out and I had done this like before I started drawing on this, and it's working fine now. But previously, you can take a look, the ones I'm pointing at right there, I put two little lines down and left it open in the middle, and that tells me it has ink on it, but it's clogged up somewhere. So I simply took a cotton swab and ran it over both sides, and when I did that, sort of got that working again. I also screwed the lid on, but you didn't see that part, and shook it a little bit, and then the ink was fine. It started to flow again. The ink that I'm using, and I think I'm going to switch it out, this is the black ink, and I'm not going to mention the company from which I purchased. I'm not going to mention the brand, and I'm not even going to put it down below. I've mentioned it in other videos, and there's controversy with this particular company, not with the ink, but with the owner of the company. And so I won't have that below. We'll have the pen that I'm using and the paper that I'm using, but I think I'm going to switch to the brown ink because my brown ink has an oil in it that keeps it from clogging up in the pen, and this is supposed to keep it from clogging up in the pen. This ink's not supposed to clog up, the black ink, but I think it kind of dried up on me. I didn't use it for a day or two. I wasn't feeling well and wasn't able to tape this right away, and so it got a little dried in the pen. So I think I'm going to clean the pen and just load it with brown ink, but I really wanted black for this. And if you have watched any of my videos before, in particular my Beatrix Potter series, then you may have recognized this style of art. This is another Beatrix Potter piece, and I'm going to be adding the watercolor to this in an upcoming video. I just am on a Beatrix Potter kick again, guys. I don't know why. I just love her stuff, and sometimes I just want to do something that's Beatrix Potter. So you got that coming up. If you like that kind of stuff, it's gonna be on here. Now, I am going to admit up front, and using this pen, number one, it frightened me because it does have a flexible nib, but I'm afraid of bearing down too hard, and I am a person that bears down hard. So I was watching myself the entire time that I was using this pen. You know, I'm used to the Sailor Feudate Manon that creates a wider line, and then I have to be careful about making the thinner lines. On this one, I make thin lines very easily, but it's harder to make the thicker lines. And so probably some of that was because it is an extra fine tip. I would like to try the fine tip. That's on my list of things to do in the future, is to get the fine tip for this and switch stuff out and try the fine tip so I can get a little bit wider of a thick line on here. And granted, as I said, number one, it made me nervous, and number two, I need a lot more practice using a fountain pen. There are some areas of Beatrix Potter's lining in which she would have used a dip pen instead of the kind of pen I am using, and I think you can get more of a variance of lines with that. But I felt like some areas of hers were a little bit thicker, and I found myself coming back and coloring those areas in. So if you're purchasing this pen and you say, well, I'm not going to use it for art, then it's perfect for writing. If you're a person that likes your lines to be a little bit thinner, this is going to be perfect for you. This is the extra fine tip. If you're using it for art, you might like the finer lines depending on what you do. I do like weighted lines, so I like lines that are thick and then they go to thin, back and forth. So if you're doing that, you might want to get a fine tip or even a medium tip. I don't know with the medium tip how thin the lines will be. I can see how this would help me if I'm doing some Cicely Mary Barker art, which I have done with the fairies. And this would help me so much more than my other pilot pen, which is the Pilot Prera, because that pen I think that might be a fine tip. You know, I'll have to look on that, guys. I always come in to record and forget to look about these details that I know I'm going to mention, and then I just forget to look it up. But I had trouble getting the fine lines for the face, and that made me nervous trying to do that. I had to be very careful. You can always take your fountain pens and turn them upside down and draw on the other side of the nib, and that will give you a finer line. But if I can keep my pen going in the same direction like I'm doing with this one, I did not have to once flip it over to get a fine line. I could get very fine lines with this. But I did find myself having to tilt the paper. So I'm having to move it around. And I don't like to do that when I'm demonstrating. I like to leave it, and see, there I go, I'm moving it. I like to leave it where it's facing you so that you can see it head on and not have me rotating it all the way over the place. But I had to do that so that my nib would be going in the proper direction so I could get the lines more easily. And once I did that, it became easier as I went along, got a little more practice with it to make the thick and thin lines. And I became a little bit more ease with it as I went farther along. I wasn't quite as afraid to put a little pressure on it, but I did find myself in the areas where it needed to be thicker, just too afraid to bear down hard because I don't want to rend the nib, and just coming back and going over it again and making a thicker line. So I do think I'm going to buy the nib for this that's a little bit thicker and just see how that works out. But if you are on the fence about getting a pen, I do recommend Pilot pens. As a matter of fact, I wanted to give away my Sailor Fude de Manon, but with all of the charges and the, you know, it's crazy when you try to buy stuff and then you try to send stuff even as gifts. There's going to be charges to send it into another country. And I didn't just want to make it for the US, because I know I have some of you guys in India and in the UK and all throughout Europe and Canada. And I wanted to do a giveaway, you know, for all of you guys. But right now, I think I'm just going to wait and see how things go before I do that. But I do plan on trying to give away my Sailor Fude de Manons, because this is going to be my primary pen. If you have a favorite pen or a favorite ink, tell me about inks that will not clog up your pen if you leave it in there like me. Put that down below for me, guys. I have this one coming up. I'm also looking at the Winsor & Newton watercolor pencils, and I have one of those videos coming up. I hope you'll join me for those. But until next time, my friends, I will see you in the next one.